We're going to get started, everybody. Please stand for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we start the roll call, so I just would like to welcome Frank Matullo and Steve Zwiak, new members of our board. Welcome. Look forward to working with you. Now to do the roll, please.
Mr. Arcuri?
You got it. Here.
Mr. Bova?
Here.
Mr. Brodsky? Here. Mr. Coyne? Mr. D'Elia?
Here.
Mark Ford?
Here.
Mitch Ford?
Here.
Mr. Matullo?
Here.
Mr. Smith?
Here.
Ms. Sesney?
Here.
Mr. Williams? And Mr. Zawiak?
Here. Thank you. You have in your packet the draft minutes of our December 17, 2012 minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes? A second. Any discussions, corrections, deletions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Thank you. The next item on our agenda is a resolution for an award of professional services. Dick, I'll let you take that.
Thank you, Mr. D'Elia. We actually have two agenda items related to professional services awards tonight, both for contracts greater than $5,000, so we have to one for approval. The first of these, under agenda item number 4, is for an evaluation of our underdrains in our filters at the treatment plant. The treatment plant's about 20 years old. About 6 months ago, the board did approve GHD, Stearns and Wheeler, and Casanova to perform a comprehensive evaluation of the water plant. 20-year checkup. And they've delivered their report and outlined several years worth of projects for us to start plugging into the capital plan. A few things were identified as priorities, and one of them was our filter under drains. These are the collectors at the bottom of our filters that take the finished water, filtered water, and deliver it to collect it to our tanks and then out to the system. They are 20 years old. There's some odd things going on with them. Some of our performance tests indicated we wanted a closer look. There are some new technologies out there. And we've also transitioned to granular carbon instead of our own filter media. So it was a priority project identified. GHD has given us a proposal, and the scope of services is attached to your agenda item, the resolution, for a $9,800 study to go in and in detail look at this one particular item. Timing is important because once a year we remove all of the media, our filter media, 5 feet of it, and replace it with new carbon. What we'd like to do is identify what we want to do, need to do, budget it in this year's capital plan, subject to your approval, and get it in time for the July-August change out this year. So this study is specific to all 4 filters, but it'll give us the information we need to get one filter started. We do recommend GHD. It is essentially a detailed extension of their evaluation. The budget for that was in last year's capital plan, capital reserve at $80,000. We spent just under $60,000 on their effort, and so there's $20,000 remaining sufficient to cover this amount. They can get going right away, and it will deliver the study a design memo within 45 days.
Any questions for Dick regarding this resolution? Someone inclined to move the resolution? Bruce? Second?
Betty, second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? I'm sorry, man, when you went like that, you're good.
Get ready to go.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Thank you. The next one?
Yes. The next one is also professional services, and this is for management of timber harvest. The board owns approximately 2,200 acres of land in 4 or 5 major sites. In 2002, we prepared a forest lands management plan, and that basically outlined almost a 5-year succession of timber sales. We did one in 2006 and 7, netted about $150,000. One is recommended for this time frame at about $80,000. Kind of a conservative estimate, but it should be at least that. We are proposing and got a proposal from F&W Forestry, who prepared the last sale, to conduct this sale. We don't have an exact number, They conduct it for 15% of the sale price. In this case, it would be approximately $9,000 if it does total $80,000. The bids will be prepared, the package will be prepared over the next several weeks, issued for bid, probably February, March timeframe. We would award to the highest bidder as long as they met all the qualifications. And at that time, the board does receive a check for the standing timber even before it has left the site. Things that F&W Forestry do for us is to ensure that the trees are marked, that the contractor is taking the trees that are marked, that they comply with the DEC regulations. They do a final inspection. We do require a performance bond to make sure roads and streams are restored. There's been no additional cleanup. They make sure that that work has been done. The forester, certified forester, is Wayne Tripp with F&W. He did the original land management plan and the last timber sale. So we recommend him for this work.
And we'll be reviewing the final stumpage contract.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh, thank you, Ted. When we receive the contract from the logging firms, and it might be one, two, last time we had two different firms do two different sites, that comes through to the board to accept, in this case, a high bid, not a low bid, but the highest bid from the responsible bidder. So you'll have a chance at that, like I said, probably in the March time frame.
And you said they do provide a bond?
Yes, they do provide a performance bond. We require that.
Any other questions for Dick regarding this resolution?
What about insurance?
They were required for property liability, commercial liability.
Mitch, did you have something?
This 80,000 that shows up as a revenue line in the budget, they pay us. It is already in this year's budget.
It could be more though, right? Hopefully.
Could be, that's kind of the low end of the estimate based on
We
market.
budgeted 100,000, so it would probably between 80, it was higher last time.
Yeah, it was. Prices have fluctuated a little bit.
As part of the current fiscal year.
Anything else, Mitch?
Nope.
Anybody else, any other questions? Somebody move the resolution, Rocco? Danny, thank you, second. Any further discussions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Thank you. The next item on our agenda, well, I'm not going to read that item. I just would say to the board that last month I reported to you that our attorneys were going to understand that the 4 towns permits were to be going forward, and this is the beginning of that process, so they are going forward. Are you taking us through this?
Yeah, I'll take you through. Under agenda item number 6, you have a resolution related to the State Environmental Quality Review Act seeker process for an action the board is undertaking. Proposing to undertake that action is submission of a water supply application to the New York State DEC for the 4 towns, Schuyler, Frankfort, Westmoreland, and Kirkland. That permit is intended to streamline the extension of water service throughout the towns in a similar manner that we do now for Trenton, New Hartford, Whitestown, within the city of Utica. It'll vastly cut down on the paperwork that's involved when the towns undertake a project to extend the water system, as long as we connect to it. For tonight, we have a resolution basically stating the board's intent to act as lead agency for the seeker review, and that will go to the one involved agency, the New York State DEC, and all the interested agencies like everybody from the County of Herkimer, County of Oneida, Department of Health, anybody we can think of that would have an interest in the application. What goes with it is the part 1 of the full environmental assessment form. In 30 days, the agencies have 30 days to get comments back to us, either challenging us, the involved agency, for lead agency status, or any other comments on our paperwork. And then, while that's going on, we're going to be completing the water supply application itself. We did include just a couple of pages of what that looks like. There's a lot more documentation behind that. It's a joint application to the DEC and actually the Corps of Engineers as well. And so at this point, the board's committing to nothing other than sending the initial package out for review. Given the timing of the board meetings, we may be able to. We intend to have the full water supply application and another resolution closing seekers, anticipating minimal or no comments at the February meeting.
Yes, Bruce?
Will you send it registered mail to state agencies?
We can. We
Will you please send it registered mail to state agencies?
We will send it registered mail. You know why?
Yes.
We'll drive it there.
Yeah.
Get them signed for it.
To one finger,
Guarantees that
they're all-
they received it and they know they received it.
For the first time in our history, we will do that.
Any other questions for Dick regarding this resolution? I hope you all found it in your packet. It was behind the other two. This begins a process that began 8 years ago, is it, Pat?
Longer than that.
It kickstarts another.
I think this
It's not going to
actually,
take us 8 years on this
this
one.
permit goes back to 2002, correct? Yeah.
Any other questions for Dick on this?
Is this a document we'll have to sign?
It is a document that
Because it has.
Our vote-
I'll sign, Pat will sign as executive director. I'll sign as prepared and he'll sign.
the resolution will indicate how you vote, if you're a yea or a nay.
Right.
All those in favor, oh, did someone move the resolution? I'm sorry.
I'll move
No,
the,
we
re-
did that.
All right. Is there a second? Betty and Bruce, any further discussion regarding this resolution? All those in favor?
aye.
Anybody opposed? Thank you. Thank you, Dick. The next item on our agenda will be the financial statement for the month in conjunction with the proposed budget for the next fiscal year, which Jim will take us through.
I handed out for you the December 31st 9-month financial report. Because of the board meeting being sooner than normal and because we were working on the budget, I decided to hand it out. We passed this on to our budget and rate consultant as well, with a whole bunch of different spreadsheets that he requires. We had a conference call today regarding the budget with our budget and rate consultant, primarily to review the budget that we presented to you in the 2 workshops. So I guess the first item, do you have any questions on the, and I know you haven't read it and looked through it, but the monthly report. Consumption has recovered fully from the previous year. Revenues are above budget. Cash flow is above budget. So we're doing well as we go into the last 3 months of our fiscal year.
So overall, though, you got it down under 2, right? You said 1
Right,
million now?
right. So moving on to the proposed budget, which I believe is on the docket tonight to vote. This is what we handed out at the last budget workshop on January 9th. So the first 2 pages is just the written summary of some highlights in the budget. Some of those items, real quickly, we're proposing or asking for $353,000 more in next year's budget. That's equivalent to about a 1.9% increase in rates, even though we're not here tonight to vote on the rates. 1% on the rates right now is $186,000. As a conservative measure, talking with the budget and rate consultant, we've kept consumption down to the levels 2 years ago, which is the reduced amount of consumption. Again, we went down 2% 2 years ago. We've now recovered this current year, but just for budget purposes, he asked that we keep it down. So it truly will, if you were to approve a 2% increase on rates, it would be a true 2%. If we were to raise that consumption up, essentially we wouldn't need that 2% because consumption would be higher, and the rate model that we put it into would eliminate that need for a 2% increase. I know that's kind of confusing, but that's essentially what happens. Again, we're in that budget, I believe it's line 5, we're carrying cash forward. That's prior year's excesses to the tune of 4% on rates, which is $746,000. Debt service, which is a big number, is actually down $100,000 from the prior year budget. Pilot payments are down $44,000. We are funding the capital maintenance reserve another $750,000. And that capital maintenance reserve is essentially paying for capital projects using cash rather than bond proceeds. And we've begun to do that, and we're building that up.
What's the total of that account?
Right now, I have it somewhere.
But that, well, and that's all regulated, right, by the bond company, where we have to allocate to that, right?
That's a different fund.
Or is it, oh, that's a different fund?
Yeah, here it is.
This is Bruce's fund.
It's
Oh,
1.
okay. All right.
It's 1.3 million. Now, keep in mind that we send it to the Repair and Improvement Fund, which actually has 4 sub-funds.
Yeah.
So in that trust fund, there's 3.5 million, but it's different. It's required 500,000. That's part of our legislation. Plus, when we did the rate model, there was a recommendation to establish 2 other reserves, which we did, and we were funding those for several years. So this is an additional.
It wasn't at the last meeting, the budget meeting.
I wasn't.
Jim, do they basically
Gave this
take
out.
the reserve fund and for
I
what's
wasn't.
owed in bond, do they net that
Thank you.
with your actual balances?
Outstanding balance, no, it's part of the, it helps us on the cash side, but on the debt side, it's obviously when we go out to bond, I think we're talking about 2 different things, but we have to have reserve funds every time we bond. This is cash that we've set aside in addition to that. This is our own reserve.
Right, that's the fund, I mean, obviously I would call it the Bruce
It
fund.
is the Bruce fund.
Yeah, but I'm saying the other bond reserve that we set up, do we set, does that actually give you a, do you take your outstanding balance less the reserve to get your net balance?
Well, on the debt side, no, it's actually, when we go out to bond for $10 million, let's say, that reserve is included in. The proceeds we receive are construction money plus that reserve, which is deposited into a trust fund. Sits there the entire life of that bond.
So when the bonds are matured, then the money becomes our
Right.
net?
And
So I guess technically, though, you could say it is that,
yeah,
it would be a net balance.
it's actually an asset against that debt.
Right, okay.
Unfortunately, we can't spend it because it's required.
Yeah. And keep in mind, we have to calculate that on there's a test that we have to perform, and it's in aggregate. So it's all the debt service.
But it-
So
reserves.
as the bonds are paid down, though,
It
do
becomes
they
less.
release any of that money to
No.
us?
No,
They don't?
it only becomes an offset once the bonds are retired. The problem is, and I know what you're saying, Rocco, but while we still owe principal, the reserve can't be touched. You can't pay principal out of the reserve. So when we borrow the money, the reserve is part of the principal balance that we owe back. It doesn't become ours until the whole thing is paid down. Then that money becomes excess, but we can't use it to actually pay the debt
It
itself.
looks at your 3-tier test, but essentially it looks at your highest debt service that's still outstanding to be paid. It says, you know, that highest point, you have to be at least that high point. So essentially, if we were to actually pay down debt over time and not renew debt, essentially that reserve could go down. I mean, if the debt service amount became less, the test became a lesser amount.
You can keep that, yeah. This, what I gave out, this was the list that Jim put together of existing fund balances, just so Jim. Yes.
So as you can see, some of our operating expenses, even though they've gone up substantially, property and liability insurance, workman's comp, retirement, huge increases, we are still able to keep our revenue increase down to a minimum. So again, we're looking at approximately 1.9% increase in this budget, even though we've had some substantial increases in some of these liability insurance amounts that we've had to budget
Is there
for.
a reason why liability went up? I mean, do we have any claims?
No. Property and liability is an effect of many things, including the hurricane. It's just a lot of insurance companies have gotten out of the market because of all the claims. The insurance company that we were with last year is no longer in government type or insuring government types. So we had to, as we do every year, we go out to bid, and our agent goes through that process, and you know, just there's not many there left. And I would say that probably the insurance company that we had before lowballed the premium to get into the market. They quickly found out it wasn't what they wanted, and they quickly got out. Any questions about this proposed budget?
What would you say the main factor is for the lowering of the increase this year? If you had to pick one item, what would it be?
I think that we're doing well on our water sales. As a result of recovery of consumption, keep in mind we went down approximately 2% in consumption. We've recovered now, so from a revenue perspective, from a cash flow perspective, we've made a great recovery. And so the rate consultant today was very pleased to see a lot of the financial information we provided, and the 9 months of cash flow that we showed, and the 9 months of revenue that we have shown, and the projections going forward into the final 3 months.
And what would you attribute the increase in water consumption to be, or revenue?
I think it's partly to do with weather. It was a drier summer. We saw the increases. We did a lot of detail, and thanks to Scott Gorgas, we really honed in on the consumption, looked at different areas of consumption. We saw all across the board. The residential customers were increasing all across the board. You can see in a monthly report, there are some that have increased substantially their consumption and others that have decreased. So it's been an up and down.
It's actually consumption, not just the fact that they're paying more.
Right, right.
I mean, they're paying better.
They are paying, or if you look at our receivables, they're actually down, which is a good thing. It's this time of the year, last year we were at 2.6 million and receivables were down to 2.3.
The one other thing we need to keep in mind is the last 4 years, which I can speak on the last 4 years because I just saw those numbers, because of the prudent operation of the system and because there was an increase in volume, especially this last year, the board has allocated a certain amount of money from its previous year and into the next year, which we've done again this year, $746,000. If by some chance things fell apart, which it has in the past, if things fell apart and next year came around and we had to use that $746,000, and we may use all or part of it in the next year's budget, sitting here next year at this time, we would not be talking about 2%. We'd already be talking about 6%, because 4% we're basically carrying over to help balance the budget. And we've been able to do that for 4 years without hurting the corporation. Again, you never know what's going to happen. I mean, I said to Pat, we were talking about what's the number. I said, Jim, what's the number? He said, well, do you want to raise the rate 6% so you can pay that off? I said, no, I just think we need to know that we are taking the success of the organization and giving it back to the ratepayers, and proposing a rate at least that's within the levels of at least what state government is saying we should not go beyond. And as we had the discussion about it last year, everybody else were getting into public fights because they exceeded the governor's cap. We didn't, and it was like it didn't even occur. We weren't even part of the conversation. And I think that's a good thing, to be under the radar while we can.
Any other questions for Jim regarding the proposed budget?
Good job. Yeah, really good job.
I think it's everyone that worked hard on this.
Is there a motion
Motion made.
to approve this proposed budget?
Yes.
I have a question on the budget. Travel expenses seem a little bit high, around 80,000 for the whole water board.
Well, just to clarify, that's not travel necessarily, it's training and travel. I do have a breakdown, but I also did a little research because that question did come up. I just thought I would share this if you wouldn't mind passing it down. I was kind of looking at industry and companies that are in leadership positions. And there is a source of training, Training Magazine it's actually called, and they look at every year, they look at the best 125 performing companies in the world, and what they see consistently is that those folks, as a percentage of their payroll, average close to 7% of their total payroll they do as a reinvestment back into training. We're down at about 1.5% of payroll is actually going into that, and some of that is on-site training, some of it is training away. Some of it, included in that total, is also just mileage reimbursements of people going to meetings. If I drive, for example, down to Albany in my own car and I don't use a company car, I could get reimbursed for that. And we have a number of people that go to meetings in various places. So not even all of that, and granted, that's a smaller piece of it, but the total includes training, which would be conference fees, as well as training consultants that come here. We have to pay their way when we're doing things like confined space training, excavation safety training, things like that, where consultants come from some distance and stay here.
Does mileage or gas reimbursement get included in that number?
That's in that total for travel as well.
That's 55, isn't it?
Yeah.
55 cents a
55.5 cents, something like that, yeah.
Pretty steep.
So mileage reimbursements are all under the general banner of travel expenses as well. But all that totaled, for our organization, it amounts to about 1.5% of payroll, which, we think is, on average, maybe for public utilities, maybe a little bit on the low side compared to what a lot of private companies do. But we do think it's important, as I've said before, that people get exposed to, the latest techniques that are out there, be able to network with other people in the industry, find out what some of these new techniques are. Dick sends some of his engineers to conferences on trenchless technology techniques, directional drilling and boring, things that you just can't see here locally because it doesn't happen around us. But we've used those techniques and been able to hire companies to do that kind of work for us, and can properly supervise it because we know how it's supposed to work. So our feeling was that we get a pretty good return by sending these people out, and we bring a lot of research dollars in because of those kind of contacts, and we think we've saved a lot of money in our approach to solving solutions by getting out there and seeing what others in the industry are doing at the forefront of some of these newer techniques and procedures. We did look at it. Some of us go to conferences every year on a variety of topics to stay up on what's going on, but a lot of that training is, as I said, stuff that happens here on site because we bring consultants in for 2 or 3 days at a time to do a whole variety of things. We just got done doing ear testing, for example, to establish baseline hearing, and a whole program that goes with that. That comes out of the same training budget. Same thing with respirator training and getting fitted for masks, confined space, as I said. All of that ends up in this training budget, and a lot of that happens right here as well, but we're paying experts to come in and do it because that's not something we can do in-house.
Is that up from last year, Pat, or is that about?
As far as I know, it's about the same. I don't think it's up. Jim, I'd have to defer to you.
It's not up too much. I would say it's pretty close.
If it's gone up at all, it's partly because of mileage reimbursement and airfare. We went through a period of time where, you could fly to Florida and back for $300, and suddenly it's $600. And so when you project out that there's 4 or 5 conferences throughout the year that various people will attend, even just a change in airfare like that might cost an extra $2,000 total.
And they use all that training budget? There's no variance from that?
Not really. It's just conference fees. If I go to a conference, there's travel and hotel if it's away, but sometimes the registration fee itself for a 4-day conference can be $700 or $800.
So we used all last year's travel?
I believe we did.
Well, we're still using it now.
With the fiscal years and over yet.
Things that are lined up.
Yeah. But yeah, everything that's been scheduled is happening.
Pat, on these 125,
Yeah.
those are mostly private, though, aren't they?
Correct.
Okay.
And their spending is 3.5 to 4%. 3.5 to 4 times more per employee, or per payroll than what we spend as well. And granted, they can do that. It's a private company.
And I brought this up at the workshop because I felt it was excessive for the number of organizations we belong to and the travel. In today's electronic world, we can get a lot of stuff
You can.
right behind you that we wouldn't have to travel for.
You can.
And when we're going to raise, or we're talking about raising the rates
Yeah.
at all, I just thought that could be, I'm not saying cut it right out,
Right.
because there are a lot of things in there we need. I just thought it could be.
I think for some
Cut
people,
down.
though, getting out and being on site and seeing something hands-on with 15 or 20 people, your colleagues within the industry is a little bit different than sitting here and, watching something on TV. You do a webinar and it's done in an hour and a half, and you hope you took good notes, and then you go about the rest of your day. When you're on site for 2 or 3 days and you get to really go through it step by step, hands-on, we think you get a lot more out of that, and it's information that stays with you longer, and the people that you meet, you can always pick the phone up and call later.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you how many times we run into situations here where, whether it's me or Dick or Connie or somebody will call, 10, 15 people around the country that we know that might be having a similar experience and can, share information with them. Even on the meter reading, a lot of the information that we used on the AMI analysis was also bounced off of 5 or 6 other utilities that we know are doing the same thing, to see what their experiences are as well.
There's a long history of board support for this budget line and for these activities, and I continue to support them.
I would like to say, if you take all the water customers, whatever the billing cycle is, and divide it by the number of the $80,000, how much is that per bill? Very, very cheap, very, very inexpensive. I mean, it's not a drop in the bucket.
I did the math earlier on the total budget, and it's about 0.3% of the entire budget is expenditures. So I leave it to the board to decide if it's excessive.
Very inexpensive.
Yeah. At the budget meeting, Dennis and others, he wasn't the only one, we brought up some issues. I took some notes, I sent it to the staff. We haven't gotten the answers to all the questions that were raised. And I want to thank Mitch for speaking up, because otherwise I would have forgotten. I am one of those people that support training and development. I think it's very, very important. I think we need to invest in it. But I also know that we need to recognize that it's not our money that we spend. And part of the review of a budget should include trend information and information that provides greater detail about different spending area that different people have questions about. For example, on the travel budget, we were looking for information, for example, as to the approximate number of people who benefit from it, who take the training, and the type of major conference training activity that's included, and to look at that over a 4-year trend to answer the question as to is it going up or down, and to see if we're taking advantage of the technology. I work for an organization whose budget is 4 times what this water board is, and we do everything we can to avoid travel because of the cost and because it's not our money. So I think I would want. I mean, it's not going to stop me from voting for the budget tonight, but I would want that information presented to this board so that they can understand not only the importance of it, because I believe its importance, but the impact it has on operations. There were a couple of other items. We talked about one of the reasons why the board got the copy of the table of organization is because there was discussion about the use of temporary and part-time staff and the impact on the budget as a trend. There was a question raised as to the use of temporary and part-time staff who were prior employees after their replacement was hired, and the cost of that addition to the budget. The board hasn't changed the table of organization for a few years. We've been asking staff to remain within their existing table. My question specifically was, of the past 4 years, what is the budget for temporary and part-time staff that are not in the table of organization? And how does that compare from year to year? Is it going up or down? Because we might question whether or not, and I don't know if it's going up or down, because I don't have that number. But if it was going up, then the question might be, should we be adjusting the table of organization to recognize the impact of additional part-time? If it was going down, well, that might just be a prudent hiring decision, and we're hiring people who are getting up to speed much faster. One way or the other, that type of information, both Jim and Pat knew was something that we had an interest in, and we haven't gotten it for discussion now. The third action item, which I was going to request of Ellis, and I'll do now, is it might be time again to compare the cost of contracting certain services as opposed to using our existing staff. We've done this a couple of times, and we've adjusted staffing and contracting expense as a result of that. And we made some, I think, very appropriate decisions at the time, but time has passed. And will we get greater use and value from our maintenance staff if we contract non-mission services like lawn mowing or street repairs? How do we determine which is more cost effective? Using existing staff, hiring additional staff, or contracting? So I think at a future meeting, I think we need to have this discussion on this cost-benefit analysis. I think this is a good opportunity, particularly, as Pat mentioned, to use the system's work order system, the agency's work order system, in order to help make that analysis. And I think it's an appropriate budget discussion. I mean, we made a decision to eliminate some contracts and put on an additional team of 4 employees. That's come up every once in a while when we talk about rates, as to whether or not we should eliminate that, go back to contracting. I think it's a legitimate discussion. And I think the staff's recommendation that we look at some of the non-mission services, the contract has a lot of value on the surface, but I don't know. You know, and it's only something that you can judge over time. I think it's appropriate this year to have a discussion related to that. I am a little upset that we don't have the trend of information on the part-time and temporary staff and on the travel.
Well,
I would have expected that.
I apologize. I guess we didn't understand that you were looking for something in a written report on that. But I can tell you that part-time staff has gone down, temporary staff has gone down, and use of retirees, to my knowledge, there's 2, I believe, and they're used for pesticide applications in the summer or copper sulfating in the reservoirs. Unless, Connie, there's others that I'm not aware of. I believe there's 2.
That's only just waiting until we have the license in-house.
Right, which we're working on now. So we won't be using them next year because we'll have people licensed to do that on an in-house basis.
We got Mike Ergo and Dave Radley, too.
Oh, I'm sorry, thank you. Yeah. Dave Radley was the guy who retired from the head meter readers. He's going to be helping out with the AMI program just during the implementation phase. It was more cost-effective than adding an extra staff to be able to do that. So as we cut down the meter reading staff, he's available to help with that implementation.
Bruce, could you send that over to Rocco, please, and we'll have the finance committee start taking a look at these matters, and then we'll see if something should be sent over to operations, and then we'll bring everything back to the board as we continue along and see what we come up with. Are there any other questions or comments or concerns regarding this budget? There is a motion on the table.
Where were the, maybe I'm just not seeing them, the cuts made from the original proposal to bring it down to this?
Be asking Jim that.
Yeah, we were at 2.4%.
We're at 2.4. We had reductions. There was a few large equipment purchases we postponed that brought it down. I actually had one too many staff people on the organizational chart that were able to, actually it was just, they were at a higher rate, and as a result we reduced that. I think it was like $40,000. So as a result of bringing it down, taking those out and some equipment, and we refined some numbers that we had estimated in operationals, we were able to bring it down from 2.4 to 1.9.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments regarding the proposed budget? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed?
I'd like to qualify my vote if I may. I still feel, I understand what you people are saying, but I still feel that travel and whatnot is excessive. That's why I asked the question, where was any cuts made? And I didn't see anything there, so for that reason, I have to vote no. Opposed.
Can I have the count of all those in favor, please? Because
I like the,
either you're in favor or you're opposed to it. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 in favor of it. Those opposed to it? Thank you, Denny. Thank you very much, Jim, and thanks everybody. I know putting this budget together as our department heads were involved, basically everybody in the organization, and it is a huge undertaking now, so thank our board for jumping in and doing what our board does all the time on major decisions. And also our treasurer for life, Bruce, who always keeps an eye on Rocco and the rest of us on these types of things.
Could I add this one, that we did vote on it, but you had asked Bruce to send that information. So if we do come up with something from the finance committee where we think we could make a recommendation, we could come back to the board and then ask for an adjustment.
Well, we can always amend the
If
budget.
anything, we know
We can always amend the
the
budget.
line.
We always amend the budget.
Right.
Speaking of which, after the rate hearing as well, if something drastic happens after that, we are up against the public authorities law about passing this budget in this time frame, and because of the notice got messed up, we're a little bit different this year than in the past, but we can revisit that issue next month.
Bruce, I did ask what a 1.7% increase would. Yeah, and the reason for that was the CPI, the cost of living index, is 1.7, and I did ask what that, if we did have a 1.7% increase, would do. 36,000, 37.
Well, you
How
just
that would-
voted in favor
I know,
of that
I know,
budget.
but there was a question. There was a question I had brought up, and I'd like that.
We will vote on the rates separately.
Yes, we will. That'll happen after the rate hearing next month. And while we're going to be looking at these things, the intent is not to go through the entire budget process all over again. It's to take a look at things. If something glaring comes up, I'm sure between Rocco and Bruce, we'll be off and take care of what we have to take care of. The next item on our agenda is the Executive Director's Report.
Thank you. I just wanted to, again, remind everybody that the public rate hearing will be Monday, February 11th at 5 p.m. in this building, but downstairs at the Common Council Chambers. The vote on the rates itself will be the following Tuesday, because the following Monday is the President's Day holiday. So the rate hearing on the 11th, on Monday, the next board meeting, Tuesday the 19th. As Jim mentioned earlier, we did have a conference call, a rather lengthy one this morning with our rate consultant. We sense that he's pretty confident with the numbers that we gave him, that it all works. However, he does like to err on a side of caution. So it's possible that he may come back with some recommendations for us. As we stated previously in an email to all of you, and again tonight, if the rate consultant has a recommendation that he feels strongly on that requires us to adjust the budget in some fashion because the rate vote is something other than what's assumed in this budget, there is an opportunity to amend the budget at the February meeting at the same time the rate structure is being voted on if it requires a change of the budget. Having said that, we will set up a Finance Committee meeting through Rocco and bring this information that's been discussed earlier to that committee. And if the committee wants to move something out of that, the time to reflect that in the budget will be then at the February meeting. So there'd be an opportunity again to examine it. Yes?
I won't be at the February meeting, but I will be here prior to have, to be at the finance meeting, and then somebody would have to report.
Okay.
The February meeting is what, February 19th?
I think the 19th, it's a Tuesday.
Yeah, I won't be here.
Okay. Excuse me. Next thing I want to mention is that it was up in the air whether we were going to have attorneys come down and speak with you tonight about the status of our negotiations with the Canal Corporation. We opted not to do that. As a result, we had intended to put an executive committee session on the, rather executive session on the agenda, which we still would like to do. I think the chairman and I discussed it just prior to tonight's meeting.
We will be going.
We do have an update that we'd like to share with you, so, but we won't have the attorneys from Hancock and Estabrook come down and do that. Ellis and I have a document we can work off of to share with you where we're at with that in executive session. Two other quick things I'll mention. I have discussed with you in the past that the Water Authority signed on with a number of towns in western Oneida County where we jointly requested funds from the state for a consolidation study under the local government efficiency grant program that the state conducts. That was submitted last March. The state sat on it until about October when they finally decided they were not going to fund it. However, the next round of that funding application would be due again, coming up in March again, in roughly 60 days. And so I've been in contact with the other towns and the Mohawk Valley Economic Development District who spearheaded the application process for us. At this point, we do intend to resubmit it, but we have a meeting this week down in Mohawk at the MVEDD office, which I'll be attending to sit with some state officials and discuss the application and try to get more information as to why it was rejected and what, if anything, could be done to make it more attractive to the state for funding.
Who's requesting the,
There were 6 agencies involved, well, 7 including MVEDD, the Mohawk Valley Economic Development District, but it was essentially 3 water suppliers in the area, which is us, the City of Rome, and the City of Oneida, and then 3 other townships that are strictly users, which were Vernon, Verona, and Sherrill.
do they want to use us?
Well, it's really to look at if the state can fund a professional engineering study to look at the best and optimal use of water in the western side of the county, whether it's, you know, a sole source from us or somebody else, or in tandem, a combination of water systems by, you know, interconnecting, et cetera. What's the best way to make more water available for the western side of the county in the most practical and cost-effective way? So, you know, there's no predetermined outcome from it. That's the reason why we wanted the study.
I mean, do we really know the answer before the study?
No, I think there's several answers. I can tell you.
Sometimes, you just
Sure.
studies,
Yes, we hope that they all need our water.
I mean, we've been talking so long about just wanting to. I guess
Sure.
that's where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
About getting more customers. So here's an opportunity, but it's not us asking for the study, I guess.
Well, we're asking for it in combination with other municipalities that have signed on to the application. So it's a coordinated effort. It involves 3 water suppliers and 3 towns that are also users. But remember that, the other 2 water supply sources, Rome and Oneida, have operational difficulties and challenges of their own. We just got done with a $30 million regulatory compliance program here to deal with new federal regulations. They have not done that yet. And so, I think part of their interest in it is to determine, what they can do maybe to prevent their own rates from going up, whether it means, cutting back some of their use, shutting it off altogether, or, providing more users to their system from those other towns. So, it's a regional approach, and it's how does the public's money get spent in the best way to avoid future costs and make whatever systems are going to remain in use more cost effective.
What funding agency does the application?
It's the Department of State for the state of New York. It's a separately funded program that's just under the banner of the Local Government Efficiency Grant Program, and it's allocated directly by the Department of State. It's one of the few funding sources left that does not go through the consolidated funding application process, which is the 6 county regions that have been set up to have that competitive process that just got awarded 2 weeks ago. So this is not linked to that program. We don't have to be on that list. If the state denies it again, then I would assume the next talk would be trying to get something into that process and submitting an application to compete with all the other ones.
What would be the cost of the study?
What we're asking for from the state is $200,000. And that's a number that's derived by the number of agencies participating in the maximum amount that could be provided based on, 6 people joining, or 6 agencies as opposed to 2 or 3. So anyway, I have a meeting this week to get that process going again, and we'll keep you posted after we meet with the state on it. Last thing I want to mention is that the automated meter reading pilot project is about to start. We had a little delay along the way because some of the radio study information that was coming back was unclear as to the total coverage. We think we've ironed all that out. We have 2 sites selected, and with a little luck, we'll be actually be installing equipment next week. So at that point, we'll be ready to go and test it out throughout the remainder of the winter. And if everything goes well, we'll hit the ground running in the spring and start full-fledged conversion. Unless there's any questions, I'll defer the rest of it for...
How many test homes are we going to be doing?
We're testing 2 areas. One's going to make take advantage of a higher powered AC collector unit. The other's going to be a solar powered collector unit, because there's a few spots where we don't have electricity, but it was cost effective to use a different collector that's solar powered. It's a little bit of a lower signal, which is why we want to test them both at the same time. We'll do probably 30 to 40 locations within the scope of each collector unit, and test the limits of it, do some close, do some further away, see how far we actually get a good signal from it. And then, so once the pilot project is running, I imagine we'll have 60 to 80, probably closer to 80 locations that we're reading every day, talking to the modems, and just testing to see what kind of field conditions.
Whereabouts are those locations?
One collector is going to be on top of the county office building, so we'll go for the maximum radius around the county office building. The other is going to be a little bit further out to the west towards Whitesboro, on top of one of the tanks. And we'll blanket that area surrounding that for the maximum distance as well. And yes.
Are you done, Mitch?
I'm sorry.
Just what is maximum distance on that?
That's what we're trying to answer. We think line of sight probably 2 miles or so. It might be a little bit further than that. But one of the studies that they gave us was showing a little bit of a diminished capacity. It's been rerun. It looks like we're going to get hopefully the original results that were told to us the first time. So now that we have, and part of that was just a data transfer in the file. An incomplete file came in and some of the addresses dropped out, so it looked like it wasn't coverage. We think it is now. Tomorrow we actually have a meeting with Neptune Meters to go through the final phase of it, and then next week, presumably, we're going to start installing some of these things and actually testing it. But we think we should get 1.5 miles to 2 miles from each collector. The latest study shows that each modem at every house will be heard by 4 different collectors, so they'll be overlapping in the coverage.
Bruce?
What's the status of the municipal recreation rate or whatever?
Well, we have to get the finance committee together, so we'll do that. We're going to do that anyway, so the stuff that you brought up earlier we'll do in the same meeting. But we've met in-house. We've narrowed it down to as tight a definition as we can and how many accounts. We're just waiting to go through and see how many accounts and what the total revenue is that's derived from those at full cost, and then we can talk about what sort of, perhaps altered rate we might want to talk about. But we did meet on it last week, and I don't know if it was you or Jim Mack was going to run through the accounts. Scott is running through it. So we'll know whether it's a dozen accounts or it's 15 or 20 and how much revenue is derived from all of that.
But how are they going to determine which accounts will qualify?
Well, we have a definition that I discussed with Ted Earl. Ted gave me some legal background on how we would interpret that. But it's water that would be used by public agencies directly for recreational use and things like, swimming pools, but snowmaking and, maybe 1 or 2 other uses.
Snowmaking's the magic word I was looking for.
Yeah, that's I thought so. We need to meet with the finance committee. The goal was to have that meeting before the rate hearing, so that if it moves out of committee as a proposal, we could then include that in the public rate hearing as an item that's been disclosed to the public, and then the board can vote on that at the February meeting.
Anything else for Pat? Any old business? Any new business? We need a motion to go into executive session to discuss pending litigation.
Motion
Penny,
made.
thank you. Second? Penny, thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Thank you.